Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the podcast that I, your host, David Woodruff, lovingly call the Woodruff Report. And today's episode is the long-awaited Super Bowl wrap-up. What a game it was, with the Eagles edging the Patriots 41-33 in an offensive masterpiece, and just a pleasure for all viewers who tuned in on either side, really. I mean, obviously, Eagles fans are going to be more happy with the result, but it was a pleasure to watch no matter what team you were rooting for. Unless you are a defensive theorist, defensive purist, in which case it was a disgusting offensive battle, which you hate to see. But this is the Woodruff Report wrap-up show. The crystal ball was wrong. The Woodruff Report crystal ball predicted that the Patriots would win. But, I mean, in a game that crazy, what crystal ball can predict it correctly? Am I right? So the long-awaited Super Bowl wrap-up show, and actually, I'm coming at you a day ahead of schedule. Usually I come at you on Fridays. Today it's a Thursday episode, so hopefully that's some exciting news. But let's get into it. It's a one-topic show. It's all Super Bowl, all football. Let's do it. Let's get into it. This is the Woodruff Report. I'm your host, David Woodruff. Let's talk some Eagles-Patriots in 3, 2, 1. The Eagles wrap up an incredible season with an incredible win over those favored Patriots in an absolute game to remember. And this was a game where no one could really stop one another. Nick Foles threw for 373 yards. Tom Brady, of course, threw for more than 500 yards. I mean, these are video game numbers. These are college football, air raid, Texas Tech versus Louisiana Tech. Just let's each throw the ball 80 times and see what happens. It was an absolute you versus your buddy on the couch playing NCAA football with 299 overall offenses. Let's see what happens. That's basically what we saw going on the television screen. And what made it more surprising is that was not the style of game that we expected to see going into it. I mean, both teams had very good defenses. They were different styles, but they were both very effective during the regular season. The Eagles had a more stout defense, higher ranked than the Patriots. They had a very good pass rush, led on the inside by Fletcher Cox and on the outside by Brandon Graham. More on the Michigan man, Brandon Graham, later. They've got a good secondary, Malcolm Jenkins in there, and a stout defense that did not give up a lot of points, did not give up a lot of yards during the regular season. And then you've got the Patriots defense, which looked to be in chaos. There was utter calamity at the beginning of the season, of course, highlighted by that Week 1 loss to the Chiefs, in which Kareem Hunt looked like the second coming of Bo Jackson combined with Jesus, as he was just running rampant up and down the field. So the Patriots defense did not look great at the beginning of the season, but an absolutely incredible improvement down the stretch. And the Patriots were sort of the epitome of the bend but don't break defense down the stretch of the regular season. They would give up yards, but once you got in that red zone, you were not going to get in the end zone. They were going to make you settle for a field goal. And again, with a crew of relative no-names on the defensive side of the ball, Matt Patricia and Bill Belichick were able to work wonders. You've got Malcolm Butler was really the most well-known player in the New England secondary. You've got Patrick Chung, who's been there a long time. But again, these aren't superstars on the defensive side of the ball. But the coaching was able to make them stout. So going into the Super Bowl, you have these two decent defenses. And the Super Bowl defense tends to be amplified if we look back on history. Usually players are very amped up. This is the epitome of the sport. This is the highest level game, competing for the Lombardi Trophy, the most valuable commodity in the game. So emotions are on high. Players are really up for it. They're all hyper, and usually this favors defense. Players are flying around on the defensive side of the ball, and offensively, players are a little too juiced and maybe are going too hard on blocks and whiffing, or the quarterback's putting a little too much on the throw because he's excited and the nerves are getting in. So the Super Bowl, again, tends to amplify defense, and we had these two decent defenses coming into the game. And the Eagles were starting a backup quarterback in Nick Foles. So this is not a recipe where you'd think 41-33, highest scoring Super Bowl ever. This was not what I expected going into the game. And this is really not what anybody expected. You assumed Tom Brady would get his because he always gets his no matter what the game is. But still, 505 yards, that's a ridiculous stat line even for the greatest quarterback of all time. So how did it happen? Now, I'm not going to bore you with stats as you probably watched the game, I'm assuming. I'm just sort of going to talk about the overlying themes of the game. And on the Philadelphia offensive side of the ball, the main theme was the run-pass option, the RPO-based attack. Nick Foles would fake the run, watch the linebackers in the secondary. If he got a good look, he would pull it and throw it. And the Patriots had no answer for this as the game went on. And I want to pause here just to acknowledge there was an incredible amount of similarities in this game to the college football championship between Alabama and Georgia. If you look at it from that lens, the games mirrored each other uncannily. First of all, you've got the backup theme, Nick Foles taking over for the brilliant Carson Wentz during the regular season, and then Bama Tua Tagovailoa taking over for Jalen Hurts. Now, granted, that was in the second half, but you've still got a backup quarterback performing unbelievably on the biggest stage. You've got the RPO style attack. Alabama and Georgia both ran the bejesus out of the RPO because it's the newest wave in college football. Remember the read option that started in the high school ranks, floated up to college when colleges started recruiting these players from high school who ran that style. And it took over the NFL for a little while. You had Russell Wilson, you had Colin Kaepernick, guys like that who were running it with great effectiveness. And the RPO was starting to do the same thing. We saw it all over college football. And in my experience playing high school football, I saw it all the time in high school football too. So it's really a new football wave, this RPO style attack. And again, when these new offensive concepts start arriving, defenses, there's a little bit of adjustment period. Remember, the read option, it looked like it was just going to take over football until teams really figured out how to stop it. That's why the triple option isn't really run with great success anymore. It used to be all the rage when it was new. It was very effective. You had the military academies who were competing for national championships on an annual basis. Now, the academies still run it, but besides that, you don't see the triple option being run in the NFL almost at all. And you don't see the read option because defenses have schemed to stop it. But right now, we are in that adjustment period for RPO, so it's being very, very, very effective. And one final similarity between the college football playoff and the Super Bowl was the whole nobody being able to stop one another motif. In the college game, it was an offensive showdown, two quarterbacks who were basically leading their team up and down the field with ease, at least in the second half. The game was a bit more of a stalemate in the first half of the college football playoff, but the second half of the college football playoff was very similar to what we saw in the Super Bowl. So back to the RPO. The Patriots had no answer for it. Nick Foles was incredible the whole game. And the Patriots just couldn't deal with all the weapons. You had Alshon Jeffrey as the deep threat. He only had 3 catches in the game, but they were very important. And they came early enough in the game that the Patriots were like, uh-oh, this guy Alshon Jeffrey is going to be a handful, a problem all game unless we do something to take him out of the game, which they did, and they did limit Alshon Jeffrey. I don't think he had any catches in the second half. Don't quote me on that. But when you make an unsound adjustment to cover one person, we all know what happens next. The rest of the offense gets opened up and everything else becomes more effective. And guys were freed up. Nelson Aguilar, 9 catches. You had Corey Clement having a good day out of the backfield. And then the Eagles were able to run the ball with some success too to make the Patriots honor the run game and making that play action game even more effective. LeGarrette Blount had over 100 yards rushing. Jay Ajayi was a good change of pace back. He had some speed to get to the edges. And it really looked like the Patriots were reacting. They were not dictating what was occurring in the game. They were on their heels. They were reacting to what the Eagles were doing. And that is a recipe for disaster on the defensive side of the ball. You want to be dictating what's going on defense, not reacting, because when you're reacting, it means the offense is on the front foot and they are having some success. So that's how it went down with the Eagles. Before I forget, there was the whole Malcolm Butler only playing 1 snap in the whole game. And again, we still don't have the full story of what happened there. Was he caught with marijuana? Did he miss curfew? Did he miss practice reps? Did he just have a bad few practices leading up to the game? Was Bill Belichick trying to get one over on everyone by not starting Malcolm Butler, or kind of being arrogant? I can win without my presumed best player on defense. If you're Skip Bayless, you agree with one of my latter statements because it's a hot take. Anyway, so we don't have the full story there. But boy, it seemed like the Patriots could have used someone who could cover anything. I mean, these Patriots defensive backs couldn't cover anything. It was unbelievable. And some of the credit needs to be attributed to the greatness of the Philadelphia offense, but at some point, I mean, come on. Can you be within a few yards of the people you're covering? Or are we just letting Trey Burton and Nelson Aguilar and Alshon Jeffrey and Zach Ertz do whatever they want for the whole game? So I don't want to make a hot take on the whole Malcolm Butler situation just because I don't have the full story. And I'm sure details will slowly start to seep out of the Patriots camp. Malcolm Butler has already been quoted as saying, "They gave up on me," so there is some controversy here. Needless to say, it is very unlikely that Malcolm Butler will return to the Patriots in the forthcoming season. So on the Eagles' defensive side of the ball, Tom Brady absolutely picked them apart. And without one of his best receivers in Brandon Cooks, who was absolutely walloped earlier in the game. Woo-wee! What a hit that was. Brandon Cooks catches about a 15-yard route, is sort of looking around and doesn't see the Philadelphia defender coming up to absolutely, oh baby. That was a hit. That was a hit and a half. That should have been worth 1.5 tackles on the stat sheet. And it was clean, but Brandon Cooks had to go out with a head injury, never to return. But especially in the second half, Gronk got going. Maybe the best tight end of all time, uncoverable, throw it up to big Gronk, he'll make the play. Then you had Danny Amendola in the slot, you had Chris Hogan making some plays, and the run game was somewhat effective enough that it had to be respected at least to an extent. So the Philadelphia rush wasn't able to hit home at all. I mean, for the vast majority of this game, there were no sacks. I think there was 1 sack the whole game, and we'll get to it because it was an incredibly important sack later, but there was no pressure on either quarterback for the whole game. Credit to the 2 offensive lines who played great. Credit to the 2 quarterbacks who were able to get the ball out quick. Credit to the wide receivers who were able to get separation quickly early in the play and not make their quarterback hold on to the ball for too long. But Brady works his magic I mean, 33 points is usually enough to win, and 505 yards is the most yards ever thrown for in a loss, regular or postseason in NFL history. So, this was not Tom Brady's fault by any stretch of the imagination. And don't listen to anybody who says Brady didn't play well enough, because obviously they do not know their football or they did not watch the game. The Eagles had no answers. Neither team had any answers. But when it came down to it, Brandon Graham off the edge, strip sack on Tom Brady. Eagles get the ball back and are able to seal the game. And this was just sort of this was not, sorry, I misspoke. This was not your usual strip sack play, because Brandon Graham, traditionally a defensive end, actually lined up at the defensive tackle spot. And this was kind of an interesting ploy by the Philadelphia defense. Brandon Graham's undersized for a D tackle, but since the Patriots had to throw the ball on that last drive, on those last few drives so much to catch up, they employed a speed rusher on the inside. And those guards on the offensive line are not used to having to deal with these quicker, smaller rushers, these pass rush specialists. They're used to these big, hulking defensive tackles who are there to eat up space and not be moved. So Brandon Graham, with a nice little swim move to get the hands off him, is into the backfield and just pokes the ball away from Tom Brady. I don't even know if he tackled Tom Brady, but he got the ball out of his hand. It's recovered by the Eagles, and that was the turning point in the game. The Patriots did get the ball one last time after stuffing the Eagles on 3 straight run plays, but their drive and Hail Mary fell just short. I do want to talk a little bit about that Hail Mary because that was close. I mean, the ball is intended for Gronk, who has like 10 people around him because everyone in the universe knew that the ball was going to Gronk. And the ball isn't batted down initially. It sort of hangs in the air, is batted back up, and we're thinking, is this going to be the classic Hail Mary play where it's not caught by the first guy, but the first guy is able to keep the ball in the air and it's caught by someone who's roaming free in the back? Is this incredible game going to have a Hail Mary in it too? But the ball does eventually fall harmlessly onto the ground, and the Eagles are celebrating as Super Bowl champs. What a game. Just let all that sink in. Remember, the major points of this game were the RPO making its way to the NFL, the Brandon Graham strip sack, the Hail Mary, and the inability of either team to get pressure, allowing the quarterbacks to run rampant in this game. Now, there were 2 questionable is it a catch calls, because I mean, what game is complete in the NFL these days without a is it a catch call? No one seems to know what the catch rule is. I'm sure they'll amend it for the 854th time this offseason, but I have a feeling it's still not going to make a difference. You had the slant route to Zach Ertz. Was he a runner? Was he a catcher? And you had Chris Collinsworth calling the game, seeming like he'd put $100 billion on the Patriots. No, it was not a catch. From how I understand the rule, it is not a catch. And we're kind of like, I mean, Chris, just have some common sense and look at the play. And, I mean, it was a catch. I know there's probably some intricacy of the rule where it wasn't a catch, but just looking at it from a football point of view, the ball was caught. His hands were under it. He took about 3 steps before the ball moved a tiny bit as he went to the floor. But I mean, how can you expect a guy to like prevent the ball from moving even like a half rotation when you hit the solid frozen tundra turf ground that has no give with a ball that is intended to roll a little bit? Humans aren't robots, and they're not going to be able to keep the ball from moving at all. The officials did not botch this game, not by any stretch, and that was a catch. Now, the other one, I believe it was to Corey Clement on a sort of running back seam route down the middle, was questionable, but I think because the ruling on the field was a catch, they were able to say it it stood. I believe if the call on the field had been incomplete, it also would have stood. But the fact that it was called a catch on the field has tremendous sway. Now, there had to be indisputable video evidence, and there wasn't. So those calls, I think, were made correctly. I think the officials did a very good job throughout the game. Not a lot of penalties were called, and the officials were able to keep themselves out of the headlines in general. So the Eagles are your Super Bowl champs. Congratulations, Philly. You may now proceed to burn your city to the ground or do whatever you do. Have a crazy parade where everyone shows up drunk. I'm sure it'll be a lot of fun. The first Super Bowl championship for Philadelphia. Congratulations on that, especially for a town that is so into football and has so many great fans. Happy for you to finally have this championship for a city starved of championships. Eagles are your Super Bowl 52 champions, beating the mighty Patriots 41-33. So thank you for tuning in to the show. Again, I am your host, David Woodruff, and this is the Woodruff Report. Be sure to tune in next week. We'll probably talk a little bit of soccer. You've got the Premier League coming to a close. Champions League games are starting up again. How about PSG, Real Madrid? Who's excited? I'm excited. Anyway, be sure to tune in next week to another edition. Thanks for tuning in, and have a great day. Again, this is the Woodruff Report. I'm your host, David Woodruff. I appreciate you tuning in so much. See you next week.